Dear all, welcome to this webinar called Agroforestry, Scaling Up a Nature-Based Solution for Water. This webinar is organized by Agroforestry Network, FAO, ICRAF, CIFOR, and Vi Agroforestry. My name is Matilda and I work at Vi Agroforestry and also coordinating the Agroforestry Network. This session is the third session in the webinar host series hosted by the Forest Water Champions. Malin Gustafsson, my colleague, will present Forest Water Champions in a while. So the outcome from this event, as well as the two others, the previous in this webinar series, will feed into a session at the World Water Week in 2021, hosted by the Forest Water Champion Network. The background and purpose of this event is based on the current challenges of a growing population, where at the same time we have a pressing deforestation and need to reduce degradation while also promoting conservation and restoration. Agroforestry, which is a farming system with trees, is one nature-based solution used for centuries to improve food security and livelihoods while sustaining managing ecosystems and their function, such as biodiversity and ecosystem service delivery. Of particular interest for this webinar is the role of agroforestry in delivering water-related ecosystem services, such as soil moisture and water recycling, as well as soil erosion control and flood risk mitigation. Considering the importance of water for communities and agriculture, we have asked ourselves, why isn't agroforestry promoted more for its ability to deliver on those water ecosystem services? And could emphasizing the services of water-related ecosystems incentivize the scaling up of agroforestry? I would ask you to please send questions to the speakers in the chat. And if you send questions, please include your name, affiliation, and the type of agroforestry system that you either work with or is interested in, so we can get an idea of the background for the question. I will also mention that we are recording this session and that the session will be available on the webpage of Forest Water Champions. We will start off by an introduction by Tony Simmons, Director of World Agroforestry Center, ICRAF. And after that, we will hear Malin Gustafsson from CIFOR introduce the Forest Water Champions. So welcome, Tony Simmons.
Tony has some technical difficulties. He is not able to log on, but he has shared his presentation with us. So I will share that now. I will just figure out the technique. Let's see here.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's an absolute delight to address you today in this special Forest Water Champions Stockholm International Water Institute webinar. I've been asked to kick off today's webinar with a few framing comments around agroforestry and water. And so let's focus those around four topics of the global water-related challenges, the hydrological cycle, trees and water, and finish with a few examples of agroforestry solutions. When we look at all of these water-related challenges here, perhaps the first question that might come to mind is, will agroforestry solve all of these challenges? Likely not. Perhaps a more important question, which challenges can agroforestry help most fix? And a related question of, is agroforestry adopted as a water solution in its own right, or are these incidental co-benefits? To our second topic of the hydrological cycle, and you can see here the main volumes, the stocks, as well as the flows, or as they're termed here, the exchanges in terms of precipitation, in terms of evaporation and transpiration, and groundwater movement on the surface or below the ground. And so which stocks and which flows and which processes do we feel that agroforestry will affect? So trees and water, and there's a lot of facts and myths and hypotheses around the roles of of vegetation, particularly trees and water. So rain creates forests, or forests create rain. But certainly, wherever we are in the world, as shown on the left, with the mangrove forest and a great forest water habitat, or on the right, which is a very dry site, very low rainfall, with very little vegetation other than trees can survive. And reminding ourselves of the fantastic engineering abilities of trees to even bring out water from 130 meters depth below the soil surface. But most exciting are some of these agroforestry related solutions. And when we look at the examples here of water holding capacity and erosion, infiltration, lift, microclimate and wind speed, these are just some examples of how agroforestry can benefit us in relation to water scarce or water abundant inundated areas as well. A lot of attention has been paid in sub-Saharan Africa around the Great Green Wall, this vegetative band, and the ability of trees particularly to ameliorate that landscape and to change it into something productive. If we jump continents to southern China, we can see similar degradation, slightly higher rainfall, but still a lack of vegetation, poor productivity in that landscape, and agroforestry is seen as the solution. And also with related enterprises, such as mushroom growing, as shown here in Honghe in southern Yunnan province. But one of the most amazing examples surely has to be Tigray in Ethiopia. You can see here in an area about 100 kilometers northeast of Mekelle, where villages were taken off the land, and one community decided that they wanted to stay there and that it would be social capital. It would be a pledge from every man and woman in that village to work 40 days for free in the watershed, planting trees, keeping livestock out, building check dams, and gambling. And what you can see 25 years later is a transformation of that watershed, with water flowing, with the water table going from 12 meters below the surface up to just 1 meter below the surface, and the ability to have a whole lot of other enterprises working simultaneously with that social capital. So to use social capital to leverage it and multiply that natural capital to drive livelihoods and financial capital. A truly amazing example. The G20 has also announced a large initiative last year under the leadership of the Saudi Arabia presidency and taken up by the Italian presidency this year of the G20. And UNCCD is the UN agency that will help execute this. And this is to reduce land degradation and habitat loss throughout the world, not only in those dry areas, to really bring land and land restoration back to to spotlight and highlight those opportunities. And it sees another exciting initiatives with the UN Decade on Land Restoration, with the post-Paris Climate Agreement coming up, with post-Aichi 2020 biodiversity targets coming up, and a real focus on building that green infrastructure, bringing back the opportunities to connect people and ecosystems and the natural capital with aspirations around a better and more thriving society, environment, and prosperity. Thanks very much for listening, and look forward to hearing the other thoughts from presenters during this webinar. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Tony. Let me see if I can figure out the... Okay, now it's working. Hello, everyone. My name is Malin Gustafsson, as Matilda said. Let's continue. I will now share my own. Too much with the technique. Just give me 1 second. Okay, now you can see it, I think. So that was Tony giving some great examples of how agroforestry can have impact on water, both in water scarce and water rich areas. Thank you so much for that again, Tony. Okay, so this webinar is the third in a series hosted by the Forest Water Champions. And perhaps you have heard of us. If not, here is a short introduction. We are an expert network founded and coordinated by FAO, IUCN, and SIWI. I think now we are about 20 members representing research and governance institutions from many parts of the world. And our main aim is to advocate for better understanding of the forest-water nexus with a focus on interactions and consequences for forest-water interlinkages. We have published several white papers and policy briefs in support of integrated forest-water management. And after this short introduction, I will add a few links in the chat so you can access those publications there. And currently our main focus is supporting activities under the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. And here is one result from our first workshop in 2017. It's a brainstorming session where the workshop participants discuss topics of agreement and disagreement within the forest and water nexus. And it shows that there are still many areas where further work is needed. This illustration shows main topics where there is a need for further discussion. So where the water and the forest experts are in disagreement maybe, or that where we need more data. And the network has used these results as a foundation of our continued work. And our next step is an event at World Water Week in August. And there we will summarize the outcomes of the 3 events in this forest water webinar series. The first one was on biodiversity, then we had one on nature-based solutions, and this third one is on agroforestry. And this year, World Water Week will be a fully digital conference, and the registration is open now and it's free. So if you're interested, you can register and take part in that week. Let me see again if I can. Yes, so with that, let's start some more presentations. First, now let me welcome Margaret Muchanga. Margaret, you're a farmer from Kenya and you're associated with the organization Vi Agroforestry and with the Agroforestry Network.
Yeah.
Please, Margaret.
Thank you. As you have said, I'm called Margaret Muchanga. I come from Kenya. I'm a mixed farmer. I'm a mother of 5 children. I have 3 boys and 2 girls. I have a family of 6 plus my husband there. My farm is 2 acres, whereby I have partitioned it in different portions because of planting different crops. Why I did so, also I added in trees for better management of my farm. In the partitioning, the crops that I've planted on my farm, I have a coffee plantation, I have fodder, I have I've also planted the napier grass, we have the bracharia, I have the cover crops. I have also a part of a dairy farming. I have a homestead where I have also the woodlot in the farm. So you can see from the pictures here what I've done on my farm. Yes. That is, I've planted, that is maize. And you can see on the other side, I have trees that cannot even affect the crops on the farm. They have helped even the maize to have good yield on it. Because part of this plant, okay. Okay. So this is the part I've planted the woodlot on the other side, and the other side I've planted maize and beans. They are doing well. The leaves of the trees have helped me even on the part of mulching. 30% of it, in fact, is for mulching as they fall on the surface of the soil. The other picture here, I have a trench line. That is a water harvesting system, whereby when it rains, it is a way of harvesting the water to help my crops sustain. You can see inside there are trees, and also we have the cover crops, the desmodium, that is fodder for my animals. Here I have fodder, whereby also in between I have mulching of the waste from my crops. After a while, I use them also for mulching in the other farm. And also inside there, it's a way of harvesting water, whereby the roots of the trees, as they go down on the soil, they recycle the nutrients, and also that water helps it sustain well as they go on growing, and also help my cows or my animals to feed. The other part, I have the bananas, whereby I do the water harvesting around it. I have that hole that harvests water, and which is a water basin for the roots to feed from that. So it is evergreen, it's productive because of that water harvesting system. In between the plantation of the bananas, I've also done mulching. I've also planted trees such as Gloveria, Galandra, even Sosibania. Also on the side of fertility, they are very much working out well. Here I have the desmodium. These are cover crop. On the side of water harvesting, they are very good because they cover the surface of the soil. All through, it maintains the moisture, and it is a way of harvesting water. It is evergreen, so you get the fodder is always throughout for my animals, and it's beautiful naturally. Here I have mulching inside the crops. You can see this is the waste of the products from the maize, whereby I use on mulching of my trees and all when they are still young. This generally agroforestry is a way of, is a natural way of beauty, and it is a way of helping a livelihood project like me as a smallholder farmer. It makes me enjoy on the farm because my farm always is productive on food security. It's a way of a good service, and it's encouraging for a practice for a smallholder like me because it's an experience I've gone through and I have loved the practice. It's a new technique that has encouraged farmers from even my area, and I wish to be promoted. Thank you for the little presentation I've made.
Thank you very much, Margaret, for your insights. It's really lovely to see your pictures from your farm. It really makes you happy.
Thank you.
We have a question from Björn. He's a moonlight farmer in East Sweden, meaning that he has a day job, and then he does some farming on the side. He asks, what is your main source of water? Does it come from the river or from rain or any other main source of water, groundwater, for example?
Yeah, on the side of rain, trees are natural producer of the rain, because where there are trees, there is rain. You cannot, it's very rare to see little rain. Always we have rain. And also when it rains, because we have planted the trees, is a way of avoiding or reducing soil erosion. Yes, please.
What on your farm?
Yes.
What is your main source of water?
I have a borehole. Yeah. I have a borehole in my home. Yes. And I use it also for irrigation on my farm.
Very nice. Thank you. We have another question from Lotta Samuelsson from CIFOR. She asks, did you notice improved water availability when you included trees on your farm? Did you notice any changes in water availability?
Sorry?
Yes. Did you, when you have planted trees on your farm, have you seen any changes on water availability? What is the difference since you have been planting trees on your farm? Is your farm more dry? Is it more moist?
Yeah, there's a great difference since I started planting trees together with the crops on my farm. It is always green because, as I said, trees is a natural resource of water from the rain. And also, apart from that, soil erosion now is reduced. So my farm has become fertile, it's productive. And also when I come now on the harvesting of my crops, I have seen the yield has increased. So there's a difference, and a very great difference, yeah.
Excellent. That actually feeds into the next question. Stefano, I can see the full name. Stefano asks if you have seen any changes in production of cash crops or in food. So any changes in yield, and you have already answered that. Would you like to elaborate on the changes in yield from your farm?
After kupanda miti what you're practicing, has there been a change in the yield? Mazao yameongezeka ama yamebaki? So najua umesema hiyo, but now you explain more, you elaborate more.
Okay, I've seen changes since I started this practicing on my farm. The production of food crop has increased because soil now is fertile all throughout. As I said, trees, as their leaves fall on the surface of the soil, they do mulching, and afterwards also they make my soil fertile. So the yield has increased. In fact, it has increased well. I have food enough for my children. And also on the farm, it motivates me now to continue working on it because now it's evergreen throughout as the rain falls, and also I have that irrigation. So the increasement of the crops has increased really.
That's really great to hear. One final question. We have two, Stefano and also another participants are asking what inspired you to adopt this model, and have you received any technical support to change the way you farm?
Yes, I've received some technical support through the trainings. They have built me even a zero grazing unit for my cattle or cows, whereby now where I take my fodder from the farm, increase of milk. Yeah. because I get now milk, I sell, I get money. I have to sustain my life. Yes.
That's great. And I think I can add that, Margaret, you have received technical training from Vi Agroforestry. Is that right?
Yes. The technical, in fact, when I plant, thank you. When I plant the trees, there are trees that we are advised to plant together with crops. We don't just plant other trees because these trees that we use to plant together with the crops are friendly. They cannot spoil our crops. So you get to see that even food is doing well. So these techniques have been trained how to plant, what type of trees to plant, how to feed the cows, and how to make even manure from it so that I maintain my farm with the manure to make it fertile. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margaret. I think we will move on to the next speaker. But first, I wanted to extend our great thank you and greetings from the webinar. It was lovely to see your experiences, and we welcome you back at the discussion in the end of the seminar.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mr. Alok Sikka from the International Water Management Institute, together with Shiv Dhyani from CIFOR-ICRAF. And Sarah, will you, Alok, you will share your presentation yourself, right? Mr. Sikka, are you there?
Yeah, it is. Is it there?
We can see you now, but we can't see your presentation.
Oh, you can't see that? Yeah. Is it coming now?
Let's see. We need to be patient, maybe.
Oh, let me try again. So
yeah,
you have to press share. You open share screen, and then you
open the share screen.
You pick the right window, and then you press share. So it's one more step.
Is it there?
Should I perhaps share it?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, Malin, you can share it. I think there is some problem. Yeah.
Maybe, is it there now?
Now it's coming, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, it's there.
All right. Okay. So I'll put it in a full view.
Yeah. Super.
Is it there?
Yes, we can see it. But we see, I think we see your presenter view right now.
How do I get to the oh my gosh.
I'm not sure why it does like that, but if you want, I can share your presentation.
Yeah, you can share it. Better you can share it. I'll stop sharing from here. Well, till the time you are sharing, maybe I'll start with and saying, first of all, let me and Shiv thank you, Malin, and the organizer for having invited us to share our thoughts on this very important topic of agroforestry as a nature-based solution for water. And so, because as you can very rightly see over here, because the two CG centers, the water and the agroforestry, are joining together, so there can't be a better proposition than that, then how best we can try and integrate agroforestry and water. So next, please. And as we know that we are talking about the nature-based solution, and when we are talking about the nature-based solutions, that basically, which is trying to mimic the natural process, and in this case, the mimicking is being done by the agroforestry, which is pretty much the natural system, and that mimics the natural process to really maintain the ecosystem services, which really contributes a lot to water management outcomes. Though it is also true that perhaps the primary objective of agroforestry might not have been the water-centric, but yes, it does have multiple benefits, and one of the key benefits is also co-benefit in terms of the water solutions. It it does provide. So next, please. And so in that perspective, I think Tony has already made my job much simpler, because Tony has already given the complete description of the hydrologic cycle and how the four trees and the hydrology, they really interact. So here, what basically it is just to depict that, as I said earlier, that agroforestry has got multiple functions, and besides socioeconomics, agriculture and forestry are the key important ones, are also the ecology, which really represents how does it manipulate, how does it improve the hydrologic cycle, alter the hydrologic cycles in favor of water, be it in soil moisture, erosion protection, or increased groundwater recharge, reduce runoff, and so on and so forth, which I think we'll see in the next few slides. So this is something that really, which is very, very important. And the purpose, the key purpose of our presentation is to try and link this thing, how the agroforestry as a natural-based solution links with the water, and how the national agroforestry policy, which is one of the biggest achievements in India, and how that could help us in pursuing this further, in trying to see that how the water co-benefit could be really realized. So over to you, next please. So in the next one, you will try and see these are the multiple functions of the agroforestry, which is both from the ecosystem services, from the provisioning point of view. You provide the multiple sources of irrigation and drinking water, and also the regulating sources, be it flood and the drought management, or climate, or modifying the microclimate, runoff and soil erosion, and the groundwater recharge. And not only that, also the water quality. And all these things, of course, they start with the supporting practices when we try and have a canopy interception that regulates the through fall, and also your stem flows and evaporation and the transpiration of the soil moisture. So these are the kind of the how this entire gamut of things in agroforestry, the what Tony was showing in his presentation slides about the hydrologic cycle, the same thing is kind of categorized here in terms of various ecosystem services component, as I said, supporting cultural provisioning and regulating services. And I'll share with you few examples. Next, please. That Malin, yeah. So this is one good depiction. Of course, I would not go into those complicated graphs, that you will try and see that once you have this kind of a tree cover in the with the farmlands and the tree lands, the crops and farms, that this really reduces your runoff drastically, reduces your soil evaporation, and also increases the infiltration. And as a result, what you get is basically more of groundwater recharge. And that is something, because sometimes what happens then, people say that yes, the overland flow and the runoff is reduced. So it doesn't mean that the overall water yield is reduced. But because you are trying to moderate and regulate the flow from the going on the surface and going into the soil, and then reappearing as a regenerated or the base flow, and are also increasing the groundwater recharge. So that's kind of a long-term good positive impact of agroforestry and the tree cover at the farmland. Next, what I would like to share with you in the next slide is something which is really very, very interesting and much quoted. And my colleague, the co-presenter here with me, Dr. S.K. Dhyani, he was the director of that National Research Center on Agroforestry of ICAR Institute. And here you see that what has been really demonstrated is that how the agroforestry has been made integral component of this watershed management programs, and then trying to see that how this agroforestry based model of watershed management has really helped in improving all aspects of water regime, be it from soil moisture, groundwater recharge, surface runoff, and productivity levels. So as you will see in the next slide please, that this is something that, but this also indicates that when we are talking about the green infrastructure or the nature-based solution, there are a number of slides which, for the paucity of time, I couldn't bring all those slides into this presentation, that you have to have a blend of both, because sometimes either our approach may not work. So here what we have really depicted is that along with the agroforestry, which is a nature-based solution, we have also tried to implement little bit of built-in infrastructure or a small soil conservation structures to try and see that how in totality the overall impact is really much more beneficial in giving you the water and the water plus initiatives. So as you can see over here in this particular slide, how the surface runoff has reduced by about 20 to 35%, and there is an increase in groundwater recharge by about 10%, and of course the ET. So this is something that to kind of impress upon the fact that once the agroforestry is integrated with either alone or with other things, then definitely you can try and see the impact of that as a co-benefit of water. So in the same breath, let me also show the next slide where you will try and see, Malin, next please, that the similar area where what has been done here is, you can see here in terms of the regulating services, your groundwater recharge has improved and surface runoffs decrease, which is a very, very important thing, because so is the soil erosion. And also the base flow has kind of increased, which will be helping in the regenerated and the delayed and the dry weather flow. And whereas the evaporation also is increased, so there is an increased biomass productivity as well. Next, please. So what you will see in the next slide, that what is our main aim of this particular presentation was that how that when these things are so beneficial and they were happening in bits and pieces, because there was no universal policy on the agroforestry, most of the places around the world. And though the India has been at the forefront, because we in India started agroforestry research way back in the 60s and the 70s, like we used to call it as a farm forestry. So SK Dhyani and we are working together at Dehradun Institute and doing a whole lot of experiments on farm forestry and agroforestry. And you can also try and see that from this, I'm not going to read the slide, that how much beneficial is this and how much is the need of agroforestry, not only in just meeting the fuel wood demand, but also in meeting the raw materials and the green fodder, and also meeting the requirement of ecological services. So what was lacking was there was no unified policy. It was all desperate efforts. So here, then we have been trying to look into to have a new or agroforestry policy. And this was in 2014, in February, the World Agroforestry Congress, you can see, was there when the President of India was there. And the National Agroforestry Policy was launched. And you'll see that three of us who are there with you, Tony is there, Tony was there on the dais, I was there with him, and SK Dhyani was at that time the president of Indian Agroforestry Society and also the director. So it is so coincident that all three of us are today sharing in the same webinar. So I'm really very, very happy to see that after many, many years, we have come together to share, and you have given us this platform to share that. So that's really amazing. So next, I would like to, so next please.
You have reached the end of the time you have, Alok.
It's my last slide. It's the last slide. So now here, what we are trying to show is that how this National Agroforestry Policy becomes an enabler in trying to bring and encourage the integration, in trying to bring a national body in the form of a mission and a body to implement this program and bring in the convergence of resources from various, there are a plethora of programs which have got the implementer, which have got the elements of agroforestry, which could be converged together to make it a more holistic approach. Next, please. So this is the last but one slide. This is again flows out of that, where we have put, as per the policy, tree on every field boundary. Next. And this is just to indicate finally to parting message that this really has become a good enabler to increase the trees outside the forest area and integrate it with the crop, livestock, and also support the water conservation and recharge, and also to meet the NDC target with the country has set out. So over to you, Malin. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. both of you. I couldn't see the chat. Let's see if we have any questions.
Malin, I have replied on the chat box itself.
You have already replied. What is the question you have replied to? Will the growing of trees and forests prevent flooding at a larger scale?
Yes, I have replied on that. And that is the benefit of growing agroforestry and with the natural resource management. That helps the downstream as well. And that is the results from the reference I cited here also in the chat box.
Mm. And then there was a question about the reference on the slide with the optimum tree cover. And I know that the research from the optimum tree cover, that is Ida Barges-Tobeya who has conducted that research. She's a friend of mine. But the paper I think is, let me find, I can add it in the chat later.
Yeah.
Reference is there in the bottom.
Yeah, it's at the bottom. This is the Allison et al. 2017.
Yes. And we can maybe share your presentation afterwards in the event website.
Yeah, I have put it in the chat box also, the reference.
We have one more question for you before we move on. Is there a difference between tree species in these effects? For example, what is the current view on eucalyptus and water use?
Yeah, definitely.
Go ahead. Okay, Dhyani, go ahead. I'll come in if required.
Yeah, definitely the choice of species also is very, very important. In fact, if you see the Indo-Gangetic region, one of the most productive land in the world, I think, there are almost 5 million hectare area is under poplar and eucalyptus. But it doesn't affect the way it is claimed elsewhere. So the choice of species, because eucalyptus also, there are 600 species. The species which you select, that is the compatibility, and that's already proven in that area. Yeah, Alok, you wanted?
No, it's okay. I think you have taken, because we have also documented, a paper also in Journal of Hydrology, how eucalyptus and hydrology work. So I can even share those references anybody wants that. So, yeah, and the key point is that everywhere you have to see which species is a context specific and the situation is specific. You cannot have a formula 44 that every species will fit, because as you said, eucalyptus has a whole number of varieties.
Thank you so much, both of you. It's time to go over to the last presenter.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. So now we scale up again, and it's time for Meine van Noordwijk, senior scientist with ICRAF, World Agroforestry, and you will broaden the scope a bit more. Welcome.
Yeah,
Meine.
Thank you. It just started to rain at this moment. I don't know whether there's any relation with our seminar or not, but I think somebody wants to remind us that forests they are partly because it rains, and the question is to what extent do trees and forests contribute to that rain or not, and that is one of the hotly debated topics at the moment. But if there is some thunder in the background, I cannot stop that for you. I'm sorry. Yeah, so I'd like to make a few further comments, and of course the previous speakers have already pointed at a number of the current debates, but in the title of our seminar, the word scale is important. So we've started with our farmer Margaret talking about her trees and cows and the crops and how things grow together. She said that, yeah, trees and rains have a relationship. We're not quite sure which direction it is, but of course, at her scale, what matters is how things grow and what the climate actually is. But if we zoom in a bit more, then of course we see that, yes, we are comparing farmers with trees against farmers without trees. So our main comparison is open field agriculture, crop field without trees, with what happens when we enter trees. So this is perspective that agroforestry is about trees on farm. It is about trees outside forest. And it is in the context of climate change and climate change adaptation. There's quite a strong drive to say, well, trees do modify the microclimate, trees make the soils a bit more resilient, etc. So promoting trees on farm is an important part of climate change adaptation, or at least it should be, because climate change for most places is mostly about less certain rainfall and more variable effects on that front. So yeah, we move from the farm and try to understand what goes on within the farm towards this comparison of trees on farm versus open field agriculture. But there is a next step in which we see agroforestry as something in between a gradient of open field agriculture here and closed canopy natural forest out there. And we start to compare, is agroforestry, is it as good as forest in a number of these ecosystem services? At the same time as we ask, is it as productive for our food crops and food security as open field agriculture would be? And of course, the answer is in many cases, well, it is somewhere in between. We do combine a number of the forest functions into things that combine with some of the productive functions of open field agriculture, but we have to understand the system in its own right. Now, what we start to see here also is that the red and the black and the blue cycles are closely linked. So the cycle of water is quite closely linked to the cycle of carbon and the cycle of nutrients. And some people only want to talk about water, others only want to talk about carbon or only talk about nutrients. And we clearly need to see how they interact together before we can understand this question, how the agroforestry, what services and what functions it plays at the landscape scale. So finally, when we start to see the whole picture about agroforestry in its role towards climate change mitigation, the carbon dominated by the carbon part, adaptation dominated by the water part. And we see, and that is what Tony hinted at, that no one plants or gets into agroforestry just because of the water. It is a co-benefit. It is something that emerges with, but it does have very good reasons in many cases. But to understand agroforestry, we need these different scales. We need to understand is eucalyptus a different tree from another tree? What happens at its roots and the soil at that scale? We need to understand agroforestry practices in their financial context and how farmers make choices. We need to understand the landscape management and when it comes to the streams and the riparian zones, etc. And we need, and that is what Alok and Shiv hinted at, the policy part, the rights and incentives. Would farmers be allowed to cut a tree? And in many cases, they are not allowed to cut trees, so they're not even interested to plant trees in the first place. So we need to get the policy perspective together with how trees really work. And of course, in the end, we have, in terms of the benefits, the whole shebang of all the sustainable development goals to a certain degree. So just a few highlights from the more detailed work that has been going on. Yeah, so I would say, first of all, yeah, we need to understand that water is closely linked with carbon and nutrients, but if climate change, people think it's about carbon. No, climate change is at least as much about water as it is about carbon. But promoting too many trees in dry places for the carbon gains is not a clever idea, because you will dry up the streams and not have enough water. At the landscape scale, there is, and yeah, the previous speaker shared the slide that this intermediate tree density might be best in terms of some functions. So it's not just somewhere in between forest and open field agriculture, but we might actually find in the parklands of the Sahel that intermediate tree densities, you combine the benefits in terms of the soil of having trees with not having too many trees and not too high water use. Now the thunder is getting louder, so I try to speak louder as well. Then the next step is that goes back to the sort of the paradigms, and we've come from a paradigm that everything about forest is good for all aspects of water, the paradise lost framing. Then we move to this frame that, yes, but if we plant eucalyptus, it's using too much water, and we move towards fast-growing trees. It's really dangerous because it will dry up the streams. And at the moment, we are sort of on the verge of this third paradigm that really looks at the whole hydrological cycle and includes the rainfall recycling, that evapotranspiration matters because half of the rainfall that we have over land and half the rainfall that I get around me here right now has come from water that evaporated from the vegetation and the land in the past couple of days. And some of it may have come from the sea, but it is a cycle. There is the short cycle as well as the cycle depending on the oceans. Finally, we see, of course, that tree cover influences many aspects, many different functions. And a more detailed slide would show you that if you follow water from the climate, the interface of the climate and the tree canopy, there's lots of things happening here. There's lots of things happening how the trees grow and how they influence the soil. There's lots of things happening in how the stream network works and how much water is available for what services. But then if you look at what are all the benefits that people get from forest or tree cover, there is a very long list. And in that sense, yeah, at the same time, not all these functions are equally important everywhere. It is very important to know where we are on the globe to understand what happens. Eucalyptus in South Africa may be very different from eucalyptus in Kenya, because in Kenya, every transpiration would come back as rainfall somewhere else in Africa. And in South Africa, that's not the same thing. So on the policy side, we need this greater awareness that location matters, and we need to leave some of the overgeneralizations behind. I think the thunder is now taking over, so I'll stop here and hope that you can have heard something. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Meine. I truly enjoyed the call for prayers and the thunder and the rain. It makes it a very lively and interesting presentation. I have not gotten any specific questions for you, Meine, in the chat. I think everybody was just enjoying your talk and also trying to understand the very intricate figures that you show. I hope everybody can go back and look at the presentation again, because it's a lot of information, really good information. So we are a little bit behind in the schedule, so we'll dive right into the discussion. So we would like to welcome back the whole panel, Margaret Muchanga, Alok, Sikka, Shiv, Dhyani, and Meine from Noordwijk. As we mentioned earlier in this webinar, we talked about the objective of this event, which is to present agroforestry as a nature-based solution for water at different scales. So we have heard from Margaret at a farm level. We have heard from Alok from a nation-based level. And we have talked to Meine about a more global perspective or more oversight perspective. So I'll just throw in the first question to you guys, and maybe since Meine, you didn't get any specific questions, maybe you would like to start. So do you think that water should play a more prominent role in the promotion and adoption of agroforestry at landscapes and at national scales? I think you're on mute, Meine.
I think we can repeat the question maybe, and also ask Alok and Shiv to join the panel.
Yeah, Alok and Shiv, are you there?
Yeah.
We are here.
You're there. Excellent. I think Meine might have some issues, so maybe I can ask you, Alok, the same question. Do you think that water should play a more prominent role in the promotion and adoption of agroforestry at landscape and national scales?
Yes, of course. I mean, and that's the pretty much the need. And I think it is already, as we have seen, that it's pretty much embedded, but perhaps it has to be brought out more upfront and trying to see that how best we can try to. And then for that, I think we also need to maybe undertake a few more studies which are more focused on in trying to, of course, there are a number of studies, but still we can try to see, because when we are talking about the nature-based solutions and how the agroforestry, because see, going forward in the future, I think particularly when I'm talking about the South Asia or the India, where the small land holdings are there. So definitely, I mean, that's one way forward for the livelihood, and also at the same time, how best in the situation, particularly some of the rain-fed areas and other areas, how best we can try and even conserve the water. So I think, yes, in brief, the question is yes. And how we go forward, that is something we can really look into.
Very good. Shiv, do you have any comments on that?
In terms of, in fact, in the perspective of India, the government has launched a number of programs where the water and tree components are there in the part of the number of schemes and programs. Yes, it has been realized here.
Do you think in relation to that, India has done studies, but also brought in the water aspect of agroforestry? Is there a plan to share that more generally, globally, in the research community or in the policy community?
See, in India, as Shiv will be also talking about that, as I mentioned that there is an institute called Central Soil and Water. Now it's called Indian Institute of Soil and Water Conservation, where both of us started our career. And so we have had a number of field or plot-based studies on agroforestry and measuring all these components, and also on a small micro watersheds. And as some of these results, which Shiv has already, that was the based on the work which Shiv had with integrated watershed management program, which he's talking about. Because in a watershed management programs and others, because as I said, because the trees are the important component, because it is based on the land use and land classification that everywhere you just can't have a good amount of land and you can put double cropping or the triple cropping. So we have to try and see that how best we integrate that, and not only with also in the fodder, because that also provides the fodder. So there are a number of cases where we are doing, and of course, as I said, we have got the data. Some of the data is already published. And of course, I mean, but as I said, yes, there is always a room for having more and more instrumentation and pilot study. I mean, not pilot studies, but more detailed investigations as well. Which
good.
Of course ICR institutes, Indian Council of Agriculture, Forest Research Institutes and other institutes are already doing. And maybe there may be much more greater need. Because of late, what at least I'm witnessing, that nowadays there is a less emphasis on the field work and more on the modeling. I'm not opposed to that, because I also am basically a modeler, but we have to see that how best we kind of integrate our modeling with the field efforts, and which is something kind of on the diminishing side.
Very good. Thank you. Meine, are you there?
Yes, I am. Yeah. Sorry,
Great.
and there is some thunder here, but at the moment it should be okay.
No worries.
Inside.
So
yeah.
I'll ask you the question too that I just asked to Shiv, and
about
how we can integrate water to play a more prominent role in the promotion and adoption of agroforestry at landscape and national scale.
Yes, and I think we've sort of, I mean, as Margaret, as a farmer said, and many farmers everywhere in the world, it is quite natural for them to look for trees. Unfortunately, we live in a world where the policy has created this split between forest rules are here and agriculture rules are there. So the first thing is for the policy frame to actually to get aligned with reality that partial tree cover is a very logical thing to do. And it doesn't have a name. We have a name for forests, we have a name for agriculture, and agroforestry is sort of the name for all the things in between, but there isn't much positive incentive yet for the things in between. In terms of the climate policy, everything went to the forest and we did not go for the partial tree cover, although in terms of solutions for people, having trees in and around cities, having trees in and around the crop fields is probably more relevant in the microclimate sense than having forests somewhere out far away. So I think we still need to get recognition for what these trees do and whatever they are called, but they are functional and they need to be recognized. At the same time, it is clear that whenever we measure in that gradient from full forest to completely open for different functions, that the thresholds are at different places. For some functions in some places, 30% tree cover is fine. But somewhere else, you may need 80% tree cover or 50% tree cover. When we recently measured on a mountain close by here, in the upper zone, you needed 70% tree cover. In the middle zone, 50% was enough, etc., because of different soils and different rainfall intensity, etc. So if people want a very simple rule, so Indonesian law says we need 30% forest. Well, for certain things, 30% tree cover is fine. Elsewhere, it could be and should be more. Other cases, it should be less. So we need to refine that part and create the space that there isn't a simple answer, 30% forest everywhere is fine, 30% tree cover everywhere is fine. No, it really depends on where we are and what function is limiting. And in that sense, I think we have the basic understanding, but how it applies is much more dependent on location and people want to realize, I think, because we all want very simple answers that are the same everywhere. And they don't exist here, or they do exist, but they are not right in many places. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you very much. Connecting to what Alok and Meine just talked about, Alok talked about the need for more studies, and Meine talked about the need to actually doing something. I wanted to ask you, Margaret, are you there? Margaret, are you there?
I'm there.
Very, very good. Thank you. I wanted to ask you, with your positive experience of water and agroforestry, can you see how your experience are spreading in the community? Are your experiences functioning as a good model for your neighbors and friends in your community?
Yeah, to me, I've realized this through my neighbors. Since I started practicing it on my farm, it has created an interest to my neighbors or in the community. Usually they come to ask questions, how I work, how I do it, and how it is benefiting me. So I see it is something that is growing in my area, and also a farmer to a farmer teaching has helped me much, because when they come home to ask how I work or how I plant, I see it as a way of training even my fellow farmers in the community. And on the side of food security, there's an improvement. So you get to see that as we live under poverty line, it's a way also that encourages in the community to improve other fellow farmers.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah, and I think the importance of having these good examples cannot be underestimated when you're looking at different scales and scaling up. So thank you very much for sharing, Margaret. Malin, do you have any questions to fit into the discussion?
Yeah, there has come up a question about what it means to choose different species. We brought up the eucalyptus before, but the question came up again. So I'm wondering, Margaret, from your sake, do you use many different species of trees when you plant?
Yeah.
And can you see a difference in the different trees?
Yes, I've used different species of trees, such as Crofyria. That works best even in the farm, together with the crops. I also plant Calandra that I use for fodder. I plant Mahamia. It's good for timber and it's friendly for crops, even firewood there. I plant Sosbania. It's for fodder. And also it recycles the nutrients as the roots goes inside the soil. So when we come on the other tree species like eucalyptus, they're not friendly to the crops. That one is, we are advised to plant only as a commercial. They are based on commercial. Maybe we get timber inside and firewood or sell the trees for constructions. So For us, we plant as a woodlot, but not mixing with the crops. Thank you.
Thank you. Building on that, a question from India regarding the number of trees you showed in your last slide, Alok and Shiv. There was the number of trees per person, I think, in different countries. And it was a quite low number in India compared to Canada.
Yeah, Malin, I have replied in the chat. I have replied also, but yes, I can just share also.
Yes.
Many, you are replying to the individual, not putting on the everyone. So that's why everybody is there.
Okay. So let me just, that's of course one of the reasons Alok has already pointed out, this the large population and all that. But another aspect was there, because tree plantation was not the way it was, you can expected. And due to different restricted regime and all these things, that's why this policy was brought. And after the launch of the agroforestry policy, there has been sea change. In fact, I have cited one example where within the last 3 years, 4 states have planted almost 1 billion trees on private land as well as government lands. And there are different incentives. I think if this survey is done today, the number of trees will be growing. But yes, still, I mean, unless this, there is another question raised by Chandra that what can be the incentivization for the agroforestry? So one of the aspects which needs immediate attention is the payment for ecosystem services. That is one of the most important. But in other words also, that market linkages is one of the aspects which needs special attention, value addition. These are some of the points which ultimately will define that number of trees are growing more in the, you can say, agricultural land as well. Yeah.
As Malin, as Shiv is telling, that what has been happening so far, that before this agroforestry policy came in, a lot of restrictions. I mean, even if I grow a tree on my private land, I have to seek the permission from the forest department to cut it and transit it. So now all these restrictions, when they are there, so naturally if I plant tree on my own land and I have to go with so many hurdles. So now with this coming up of this national agroforestry policies, a lot of those regulations have been eased off. And so it becomes far more easier for the people. And so the thing is that unless and until we try and promote agroforestry, which is tree outside the traditional forest area, because that will be one way forward to have more number of trees per person. And of course, looking at the size of the Indian population, you can always imagine that, I mean, for us, we will not be even in the near future close to the other countries, but yes, we'll be doing better than, hopefully doing better than what we are right now.
Thank you. It is time to go to the end, to the closing remarks. But before that, I gave the wrong date for our event at World Water Week. So I will now in the chat add the correct date. It's on Friday, the 27th of August. So I will share that with you. And there was also a question if it's possible to see the 2 previous Forest Water Champion in this webinar series, the events, and I can add them also, the links to them in the chat so that you can see them if you want to. Now, please, Elaine, give us some wise closing remarks.
Thanks, Malin. And thank you, Matilda, both of you, for your excellent facilitation. And thank you to all of the presenters and to all of the participants. Based on the questions and the dynamic engagement, this is clearly a topic that deserves more attention and further discussion. And hopefully this webinar is only the beginning of the conversation and has inspired further research and understanding on agroforestry as a nature-based solution to water. So Margaret Muchanga presented how including trees and mulching on our farm improves soil water availability and fertility by reducing soil erosion. Doctors Alok, Sikka and Shiv Dhyani showed how a national policy on agroforestry has enabled broader implementation as a nature-based solution, providing multiple co-benefits, including improved integrated watershed management. And Dr. Meine van Noordwijk spoke to the importance of scale and that we need to understand how the different potential benefits from agroforestry interact, including synergies and trade-offs. He also mentioned that it's important to take these interactions into consideration as we promote agroforestry in international and even national agendas. So based on all the conversations and examples, it's clear that agroforestry is ultimately a collective term for different systems, and these are diverse and complex in nature. And at the same time, the relationship between forest, trees, and water is similarly complex and also scale dependent. But this diversity and complexity should not be seen as a deterrent. It should be seen as an opportunity to apply a water lens to land management. So we can see this diversity of agroforestry actually as a strength because there are so many types of systems and different ways in which to implement these systems. It's ultimately an adaptable concept that can be tailored to socioeconomic and environmental objectives. So ultimately, prioritizing water as one of these management objectives and also finding a way to effectively manage for water balances can improve productivity of the farm and the broader landscape by improving water availability and mitigating soil erosion. Because we are getting short on time, I will leave it there. I would put a reminder to please join us at World Water Week, where this conversation will continue, and we will provide a synopsis of the different webinars in this series, which included discussions on the role of water and climate change, as well as biodiversity. As Malin mentioned, because World Water Week is a digital conference this year, it is free for registration, and we will be more than happy to continue the conversations and this dynamic dialogue on the 24th of August. So thank you all for your attention and your participation, and we hope that you continue to be part of these discussions in the future. Malin, I hope that was wise enough for you.
It was great, Elaine, of course. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think with that, we have reached the end of the event today. I will add the link now to World Water Week. So if you want to register, you can click this link and read more about it there. Thank you so much to all the presenters. Thank you, Matilda. Thank you so much, Elaine. It's been lovely having you here. And thank you so much to all who has listened to us and asked a lot of questions and been engaging in the event. We will add the presentations and the recording to the event website so that you can see it there or share it if you would like to share it with someone. Thank you all so much again, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.